So since studying biochemistry, I have become much more aware of what I'm putting on my skin and what I'm obviously putting within my body. And I have obviously made a lot of lifestyle changes to try to minimize, the chemicals and things I'm exposed to. One of the things that I'm now much more aware of is sunscreen, and not kind of putting on sunscreen every single day because I know it comes with a lot of chemicals. But what's really interesting is the last few years I've found myself not really getting burnt like I usually do. And this is despite the fact that I live in Australia still. I am still exposed to the Australian sun. I still am here throughout the summer in Australia. And yet every year, despite doing the same thing, I don't get as burnt as I used to. Now, I will just put a little note on this. This is not talking about me standing in direct sun all day long. We all know that if you do that in Australia in the middle of summer, you're bound to get burnt by the end of the day. But I'm talking about regular sun exposure when you go out for a jog, exposure when you're playing with the kids in the water. Why is it that these days, despite the fact that I'm not really wearing sunscreen, I'm not getting burnt the same as I used to? Well, my learning about biochemistry over the last few years has kind of given me some little hinters as to what could be going on here. Let me explain. So one obvious one here is that with my learning with biochemistry, I have now learned that a lot of the guidelines that we're given by the government aren't necessarily 100%, great. One of those is cholesterol. So I have incorporated more cholesterol in my diet via animal foods, and we can see how this can relate to being more protected from the sun. So what happens essentially in a usual situation is our body will be exposed to UV light, and we will take some of the cholesterol that we naturally hold within our cell membranes, and we will start breaking that down in a pathway that will eventually lead to the production of more vitamin D. Now, we know that vitamin D is essential for protecting your cells from the sun. So it's no surprise that when you are allowing your body the appropriate amounts of cholesterol to be used in this process, we effectively get a little bit more protection from the sun. But here's another really interesting one that you may not know about. So again, when we're exposed to natural sunlight, we have mechanisms that will naturally occur that will protect us from normal sunlight exposure. So what will usually happen again is we'll be exposed to the sun. This will trigger our hypothalamus in our brain to start knocking on the door of the pituitary gland and saying, hey, we need to produce a special hormone called melanocyte stimulating hormone. This will then be produced and it will go to the cells and start telling them essentially to make more melanin. Now, what do we know about melanin? Melanin is a natural product that our cells will produce, and it will actually protect them more from the sun. But what happens when you are kind of getting in the way of that process and wearing sunglasses? It's darker. Your body doesn't get that natural trigger to do this process. So a really interesting one is I haven't felt the need to wear sunglasses over the last few years as much. And I would say that's probably something to do with maybe the fact that I'm less inflamed. We all know that when you're inflamed, for example, you've had a big night on the piss the night before, and we all know that when you're inflamed, you can't stand sunlight as well. You don't like light as much. So when you're not inflamed, you don't really feel the need to wear sunglasses as much. That's my take on it anyway. So I'm not wearing sunglasses as much. I'm getting this natural trigger that will alert my hypothalamus, alert my pituitary gland. I make more natural melanin, and I'm therefore a little bit more protected from the sun. So once again, look, these are my own assessments on it, but I've understand a pretty good amount of biochemistry these days, and the mechanisms add up. So I hope you find that interesting.